My name is Victoria White, and I am in the Sonoran Desert outside of Tucson, Arizona. Today I'm going to show you what I do as far as mixing soil goes for moringa trees, planting seeds and transplanting trees and all of that. So, because I get asked this question a lot. And so this is some soil that I've already mixed, and it's basically a combination. We have a clay, loamy soil out here in the desert. It can get difficult to drain normally on its own because it is high in clay. So I like to add amendments to it to help it drain. These are my supervisors here, Emma and Bear. So anyway, this soil has some sand in it that we get from a local wash just down the street, and we also put some organic matter in it because clay is good as far as providing minerals and all, but you need drainage and to unlock those minerals. So I'm going to show you how I mix it. If you're doing smaller amounts, you wouldn't necessarily need to do it the way I do. I use the cement mixer so that it can mix really well. And one thing I found as far as using the cement mixer is if you put dry materials in, it tends to separate out the materials. So if you moisten them somewhat like you would cement, it more evenly distributes all of the stuff that you're adding in together. So I'm going to start out by adding in, this is powdered micronized azomite. You can look up about it on my website, moringatreeoflife.com. But this is this comes from an ancient mine up in Utah that is a combination. They believe it's like 30 million years old, and it has a combination of volcanic ash that had gone into a ancient lake bed, filled it up. So it's a combination of the plant matter, the silt, the volcanic ash. It's high, very high in trace minerals. And so a lot of our topsoils in the world today are deficient in minerals and especially trace elements. So I like to add this into the mix to give the plants the best they can have to start with. And you can't put too much of this in because the plants will only uptake what they need. It's not like adding fertilizer, which you have a lot of nitrogen in, where you can actually burn your plants. You're not going to be burning your plants with the azomite. I start out with this because I'm going to add this in here, and before I get it going, I'm going to put some water in so this doesn't all totally blow away. So that's going in there. And then I'm just going to grab a bucket that I happen to have here of some water, put it in there. And then I've got this cement mixer I'm going to turn on, and it'll start kind of mixing that so that it's not too much powdery before I put anything. You can still see some of the powder coming out. So give that just a minute. And then I add in some composted manure. And you know, you can get, some of this is goat manure, llama manure, chicken manure, horse manure. You want to compost whatever you have because you don't want it to be so hot that it could burn your plants. And also, if you compost it, it helps to break down the weed seeds so that you're not going to end up with a whole bunch of unwanted weeds in your garden. But it does add a lot of carbon and nitrogen and just organic matter to the mix. So I'm going to put some of this in here. So then the next ingredient we'll put in is, I have this Arbical Organics compost. And they are an insectary, and they grow beneficial insects for keeping fly populations down and ladybugs and all that kind of stuff. And this is the byproduct of what they use for that process. They also use effective microorganisms in that, if you're familiar with that. I have information on both of these on the website if you want to look in more detail. But this again adds some carbon, some nitrogen, some plant, some organic matter, and also a lot of beneficial bacteria. So you can see we're doing parts. This is one part of the compost, one part of the manure, and then I've got some of our native soil and I've got some sand. So I'm going to actually put a little more water in here because it's starting to dry out again. No, but it'll be fine. I think I've got another one here. Can't really put too much water in. So then we've got our native soil here, and I do like to add native soil. I'm really big on trying to keep as much microbial balance as you can get in the native environment. And I know when you buy a lot of these potting soils from the store, they can be sterile basically. So I like to have a lot of the native stuff that's around. So this is our soil here. I've got it in this bucket. Just let it roll around. You're going to start seeing some of the dirt come out of here because it's going to be filled up a little much, but I can still mix it a little bit when it falls on the ground. And then here is some sand from a nearby wash to help give a little more drainage. So we've got one part of all of the above, the things that I just mentioned, the compost and the manure and the dirt and the sand, and then, oh, I don't know how much of the azomite I put in, maybe 2, 3, 4 cups or so. And it's starting to come out a little bit, but that doesn't stop me from putting more soil in, because I do like to have a little more soil. So I'll at least put 2 or possibly 3 buckets of the dirt in there, and I may even put 1 more of the sand. So here's another bucket of the dirt. That may be enough for now. Okay, and so the last ingredient that we need to put in is some of this peat moss, which also adds some aeration and some organic matter into the soil. And so I'm just going to mix it all in with the rest of this. Let it turn for a few minutes. And then some is kind of mixing out, it's coming out a little, so I do a little extra mixing. So the soil has had a chance to spin around for a few minutes, and I always do this to get some of it out, so when I'm tipping the cement mixer, it's just not too heavy. You can see it looks like nice dark brown mix, potting mix. So this is basically what we end up with. It's just to recap again, I put 1 bucket of the compost, Arbico Organics, 1 bucket, this is 5 gallons, 1 5-gallon bucket of the manure. I put 2 buckets of our native soil in, 1 bucket of the sand, and 1 bucket of the peat moss. And then I add some of the azomite in with it. And I get a pretty decent mix that does have the native soil as well as a lot of organic matter, and there's a lot of microbes in there, beneficial bacteria. We also do use EM on top of all of this too when we're watering and whatnot. So now I'm going to show you how I plant my moringa seeds, how I actually start them. And I've got my seeds over here. So what I like to do, I start them in a 1-gallon pot, and this just works for me. You might be able to modify it according to your situation. If you're only doing a few starts, you can just put 1 seed in each pot if you want. But I like to start multiple seeds in a pot. And one of the things with moringa is you do not want the roots to get disturbed as much as possible when you're transplanting, because they are quite sensitive, and they're kind of like mung beans. They snap really easily. They're not your typical kind of like hairy long roots that can be moved around easily. So I do like to treat them with caution, and doing it this way I am able to, when I go to transplant this, I have in here a couple toilet paper rolls and some paper towel rolls that I got from a friend of mine who collects them at her office, has the cleaning people collect them. So I just have these in here, and they will biodegrade, so when you go to Transplant, you don't have to worry about removing them or anything. You can just take these seedlings out and then put them in another container. So I will fill this up. And make sure that I get a lot of soil even around the sides where the outside of the rolls, just to make sure it's all filled up. And then I put one moringa seed in each one of these toilet paper rolls or paper towel rolls. It's a good way to recycle your cardboard too. The other thing that's great about cardboard is the worms love it. And I tend to have a lot of worms in our greenhouses and our garden and all, and they will come into these pots to start chewing on these paper towel rolls, which is another really great thing to get worms into your soil. So here's some moringa seeds, and I'm just going to put, I've got 7 paper towel rolls in here, and I'm going to put 1 in each one. I put these about 1 inch down. I don't do anything like soaking overnight. I've heard people doing that, and that may work well, but I find I don't need to do that. They come up just fine without having that done, so I just put them in the ground. And then the other thing I do, so these are all probably 1 inch down. I add something called Green Gardens mix, which you can also read about on my website. But it is a combination of worm castings, mycorrhizae, and Tazo B, and they are all beneficial microorganisms, bacteria and fungi that help to develop a stronger root system, and it helps the plant to uptake nutrients and water better, to grow bigger and faster and healthier, and it really just sets up a good microbial balance to your soil, so that you're basically inoculating your soil with very beneficial microorganisms to get it going. So typically, if you're going to be planting something out, you could use a tablespoon into each hole, but I'm just planting the seeds right now, so I'm just going to use about, this is even a lot, a teaspoon. I would put maybe half a teaspoon of this in each one of these. And then when I go to transplant them out, we'll do that segment. You'll see I'll put a little bit more in there. So I put them in here so that when the seed starts growing, you want to make sure this gets in contact with the roots, and it will travel along the roots. So I put it in right with the seeds, so when the roots start, they're going to naturally make contact with this great inoculant. And then I just fill up the holes with some dirt here, and I normally mark what's in here so I know, and water it really well, and then I put it in the greenhouse. One thing to make sure is if you are planting some seeds and you're starting them in the house, you want to make sure that you have something well drained underneath the pot. So these plants are very susceptible to root rot, and you don't want that to happen. So if you have something underneath, like a dish to catch your excess water, what I would recommend is putting some gravel or something into it so that it sits up a little bit, so that the water will wick away from this, and you'll never have your roots sitting in standing water for any length of time. So otherwise, if it's just sitting outside, obviously whatever's left over is going to go out the bottom of the bucket, and you'll be fine, the bottom of your pot. So that's all there is to actually planting this. The next step we'll do is, when these start coming up, how I transplant. Okay, so now what we're going to do is transplant some seedlings, and these were planted on February 23rd, and today is March 13th, so that tells you how fast they grew from the time they were planted as a seed till today. One thing I'd like to mention is that when the weather is cold, we get our plants, we start our seeds in the greenhouse, and I will start some in the greenhouse even in the winter time here, but it gets cold and sometimes they'll sit in the soil for weeks and months until they're ready to come out if I start them in the dead of winter. But because these started when it's already starting to get warm out, they were able to come up quite quickly. These have all been planted in these tubes that I just, you saw me plant the seeds in. And so what I do with this is first, I actually need to water this because in order to get them out, to have them slide out more easily, I recommend you water them and then they'll just slip right out. So I'll be right back. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and put some water in here. And that just helps the process along. And then I can just turn this upside down and they'll just come popping right out. It's a little bit of a technique you get so that you make sure you don't snap off any of these trees. See how they come right out? And then I'll set them down and I easily just separate all of these out. You can see there's a bunch of worms that are already in this pot all over the place. So those are going to be happy to go into their new pots. We can actually take one of these and put it into another pot. What I like to do is add some more of this Green Gardens mix. So you'd add about a tablespoon into here, and then we just set it into that pot, fill the rest up with soil. And you can see that we really didn't disturb the roots or anything in doing that. So on the bottom here of this, you see there's just a little tiny little bit of a root coming out, but that's fine, we haven't disturbed it at all, and we'll be able to very gently put that into the other pot. And then the rest of this just stays as it is. So this is a way to transplant without causing any kind of trauma to the trees whatsoever. So I have to be a little more careful in transplanting this one so I don't break off that root, but that is what the taproot looks like of this tree. And you can see how much longer that is than the size of the tree at the moment. So what I'm going to show you also is a larger tree and what the root looks like, just so that you have an idea what the root of a moringa tree looks like. Okay, so this is a moringa tree that has died back for the winter a little bit, and it has also gone dormant. So it lost all of its branches, all of its leaves. If you look really closely, you can see it starting to leaf out again at all these little nodes here, and then on the top part you'll see leafing out. Just for demonstration purposes, I took this one out of the pot. I put it in a bucket of water and all of the dirt around it, the soil just kind of came off. And so this is what a moringa root looks like. It has one primary large taproot, and then it has some lateral roots.